yes, of course, the UK does have two main parties, but so much of what I've been seeing coming out of the UK for this election is basically that the Tories are going to get wiped out, that this is a historic election in terms of the defeat that is coming up for them. And actually, I feel like I've heard as much about Tory versus reform as I have, which we've discussed on this podcast. This is a right wing alternative to the Tories, I guess.
Yeah.
I feel like I've heard as much about Tories versus reform as I have about Tories versus Labour, the party they're against which they're ostensibly meant to be running. So what, I mean, I guess, can you, you know, given that this is a context where we're sort of used to thinking of two major parties, but also given that that's just not been how this election is unfolding, can you sort of give us an update on where these various parties stand?
Yeah, so the UK, it is a system, has been for my whole lifetime, but way beyond my lifetime, dominated by two main parties, Labour and the Conservatives, with a number of smaller parties, notably the Liberal Democrats, and then some parties that operate in Scotland and in Wales. But Labour and the Conservatives have dominated for a very long time. There was a coalition with the Liberal Democrats 2010 to 15, but basically it is a story about two main parties. And look, we don't know how the election is going to go, but the polls at the moment show that there is a genuine live possibility that the Conservatives might not be the second largest party after the election, and that the Liberal Democrats could conceivably be the official opposition, which is what the second largest party becomes. If so, that would happen with the Lib Dems not having very many seats, actually. We're still talking about the 50, 60, 70 seats rather than the sort of 150 to 250 seats that we're used to seeing from opposition parties. And the basic reason for that is not a story of Liberal Democrat strength so much as extreme Tory weakness and also Labour strength, to be fair. Someone pointed out that the combined vote share of the two main parties is set to be the lowest ever, or the lowest for a very, very long time in this election. On polling, that could well be true, but to be fair, the Labour Party is keeping its end of the bargain up. It's that the Tories are sort of 15 to 20 points down on where they've been in previous elections. The party that is putting a big sort of spanner in the works for the Tories at the moment is, as you say, the Reform Party, which I think we have discussed on this podcast before. It's the successor party of the UK Independence Party and the Brexit Party. They're all the same party. They just have had different names and slightly different legal structures. And Nigel Farage, who was a leading member of both of those parties, is now the leader of Reform. On almost any analysis of the polls, Reform will not win very many seats. They might win. The biggest assessment I've seen is that they could win 7. That seems very high. Nigel Farage is standing in Clacton, which is the seat that is most likely to deliver a Reform win. But look, they will probably come out of the election with 1, 2, 3 seats. It is completely conceivable that they could come out with no seats at all. But they are on between 10 and 18 points in the polls. They are taking a huge chunk out of the Tory vote, and that is causing a huge amount of panic. In an election where not very much has happened, Labour started the election with a big poll lead. It's still got a big poll lead. It started the election set to win a big majority. It still is. But the most interesting poll from the point of view of commentators, at least, of the last week or two was one single poll that showed the Tories coming third to Reform. And that has really transformed the debate in the UK, because it's not about whether Labour will win. It's about what the shape of the Conservative Party is after the election. Whether they come second or third on seats, they are set on current polling to have very few seats. One of the reasons for that is that Reform has taken their votes away. And Nigel Farage is quite open about the fact that he would be open to leading the opposition. He would be open to some sort of post-election deal. He thinks the Tories are a dead brand, but he thinks that he could suck up a lot of that support, both in terms of votes and in terms of MPs. And that is more interesting because it's news than a story we've had for really quite a long time about there's probably going to be a Labour government. And by the way, it really suits Labour not to be the centre of attention in this election, because if you're winning by a long way, then you don't particularly want scrutiny. You don't want people saying, asking lots of questions about what you're going to do. You want to be not the story. If they can carry on and just pick up anywhere between 38 and 45% of the vote and win by a mile, then the fact that no one was talking about them beforehand is really not their problem.